There's a version of ministry that ends at the church door. The pastor preaches, the people give, and everyone goes home to roughly the same kind of life. That version exists somewhere, just not on this list. This list is of private estates, gated compounds, and residences so far removed from the people in the pews that home barely covers it. Acreage is measured in dozens, square footage in the thousands, amenities that belong in five-star hotels, not parsonages. One sits on land so big it has its own unofficial name. Number 10. Pastor David Ibiyomi. David Ibiyomi of Salvation Ministries in Port Harcourt has spent decades building one of the largest and most financially productive ministries in southern Nigeria. The main auditorium fills consistently, the congregation spans multiple locations, and the private residence attached to his name reflects the cumulative output of all of that growth in a way that is difficult to overlook. The compound sits behind a perimeter wall on extensive private grounds in Port Harcourt, presenting a residential structure whose scale separates it immediately from anything in the surrounding neighborhood. The main building rises across multiple floors with a facade that carries the kind of architectural confidence reserved for properties whose budgets are not a concern. The entrance presents a double-height portico, wide stone steps, and a driveway long enough that the gate is rarely visible from the front door. The exterior presents manicured grounds, a significant residential structure, and the kind of perimeter and private access that places it firmly outside what most Nigerians would recognize as a private home. The interior finishes and overall scale position it in a category that the average member of his congregation will not encounter in their own housing at any point in their lifetime. Ibiyomi is a pastor who preaches regularly about financial breakthrough and the material evidence of God's favor. He also drives a Tesla Cybertruck to universities and maintains a confirmed fleet of multiple Rolls-Royces alongside the private compound. The residence and the vehicles exist as a coordinated picture of accumulation, each asset reinforcing what divine favor looks like when it fully arrives. For the congregation giving sacrificially toward their own breakthroughs, the compound behind his private gates is a gap between the promise and the recipient that the sermons do not tend to address, and the property does not allow anyone to ignore. Number 9 has a price tag of $882,500, 6,000 square feet, and a sale in September 2025 that happened so quietly that most people did not find out until the property was already gone. Number 9, Pastor Jamal Bryant. When Jamal Bryant's divorce proceedings became a matter of public record, they carried a detail that most people in his congregation would not have expected. Court filings placed his monthly income at $46,000, which translates to just over $500,000 annually. That figure is not a pastor's salary in any conventional sense. It is the income of someone whose ministry has grown into a financial operation large enough to produce that kind of personal draw month after month. His primary Atlanta area residence spans approximately 6,000 square feet, a figure that places it well above the national average for single-family homes and firmly inside the luxury residential bracket of the Atlanta market. At $882,500, the property sits in a gated community designed for the kind of income that Bryant was drawing monthly. The residence itself carries the design profile consistent with premium finishes, significant interior volume, and the kind of private, manicured setting that a pastor at his level of public visibility would require to maintain any separation between his professional profile and his personal address.
In 2020, for $882,500.
6,000 square feet is not a large number by the standards of this list. But in the context of a congregation whose members are largely working and middle class, it represents a residential acquisition that most of them would need multiple lifetimes of combined income to reach. In September 2025, Bryant sold the mansion without any public statement, no announcement, and no explanation offered to the congregation or the press. A pastor with his level of public visibility moving quietly off a significant property generates questions that a press release would at least have partially answered. The absence of one left the speculation to fill the gap on its own. Bryant has spent the better part of 2 decades operating at the center of a public narrative that contains genuine contradictions. Documented infidelity during his first marriage generated consequences that followed him from Empowerment Temple in Baltimore to New Birth in Georgia, never fully settling out of public view. At the same time, he remains one of the most compelling preachers in American Christianity, the kind of communicator who can hold an arena and generate a sermon clip that travels nationally before the service ends. Both of those things are true, and neither one cancels the other. His residence is not the largest on this list by square footage or valuation.
2020 for $882,500.
But the story attached to it makes it one of the more revealing addresses here, not because of what the house looks like, but because of what it sits between. Number 8 is a pastor whose home became a headline before he had fully settled into it because of who paid for it and what that said about where the money in his ministry was actually going. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 99% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. Thank you so much. Now, back to the video. Number 8, Pastor John Gray. John Gray arrived at Relentless Church in Greenville, South Carolina in 2018 after a high-profile run as an associate pastor at Lakewood Church in Houston, and the transition came with an acquisition that his congregation was not expecting to fund. Church documents and reporting confirmed that Relentless Church purchased a $1.8 million home for Gray and his wife, Aventur. The property, a multi-million-dollar luxury residence with resort-caliber finishes and amenities, was acquired using church funds, money given by a congregation that had no public prior knowledge of the transaction until it came to light. The revelation generated significant controversy both within the church and nationally, with members and observers questioning the appropriateness of a congregation funding a pastor's personal luxury real estate at that price point. The principal living spaces are generous and well-appointed, formal and informal entertaining areas, finished with the kind of materials and craftsmanship that distinguish a luxury commission from a standard build. The primary suite carries the square footage and bathroom specification of a boutique hotel room. The outdoor space extends the living footprint further with landscaped grounds and private entertaining areas that match the overall standard of the interior. In the Greenville market, $1.8 million does not purchase a modest home. It purchases something that most residents of that city will drive past rather than into. For a pastor who had built his entire public identity around authenticity, vulnerability, and the kind of relatable personal storytelling that made him one of the most watchable communicators of his generation, the revelation that his home was purchased by the people he preached to introduced a detail into his narrative that no amount of biblical precedent could fully reframe. The gap between the story he told from the stage and the address he returned to after the service was now on the public record. If you think that was impressive, think again, because number 7 is carrying a home that doesn't look modest by any standards. Number 7, Pastor Michael Todd. Michael Todd built Transformation Church in Tulsa into one of the fastest-growing megachurches in the United States through a combination of social media fluency, generationally targeted preaching, and a personal brand that positioned him as one of the most culturally connected young pastors in American Christianity. His Relationship Goals sermon series generated millions of views online and a best-selling book deal. By his early 30s, he was speaking on platforms that most pastors never reach across an entire career. The private residence attached to that trajectory is a modern, large-format luxury home in the Tulsa area with high-end design finishes, significant square footage, and the kind of amenity profile that places it well above standard residential real estate in its market.
So Here's the foyer area. Of course, we have the beautiful piano. And then right here is your dining room.
The property is not the largest on this list by acreage or valuation, but it represents a specific kind of acquisition, the home of a young pastor who built wealth at a speed that the institutional church rarely produces and the prosperity gospel frequently promises. Todd faced significant public controversy in 2023 when a sermon clip circulated in which he passed a cup of his own saliva to a congregation member during a service. Presenting the act as a demonstration of faith, the clip generated international coverage, widespread criticism across both religious and secular media, and a level of public scrutiny that a pastor with a smaller platform would not have survived intact. Todd addressed it publicly, apologized, and his congregation largely remained. His home did not generate headlines on its own. It exists quietly inside a financial picture built on a congregation that gave generously, a book deal that sold widely, and a social media platform that monetized at a level that pastoral income alone does not typically reach.
There's not a lot of yard space. It's very much just entertaining and enjoying your house. We're not playing, football in the yard here.
The residence is the address that all of those income streams are paid for. The congregation followed him from a small building into a much bigger one, believing they were building something together. Sadly, only one person ended up living in it. If you think we're done yet, you're wrong, because the property in number 6 sits in a real estate market where the entry point for luxury starts at a figure that would be the ceiling in most other American cities. Number 6, Pastor Sarah Jakes Roberts. Sarah Jakes Roberts built her public profile in the long shadow of her father, T.D. Jakes, and then stepped fully into her own lane, founding Woman Evolve and building a ministry presence across multiple platforms that operates at the intersection of faith, personal development, and media production. She and her husband, Toure Roberts, lead Hope City Church in Los Angeles and Denver, and the financial infrastructure supporting that platform reflects the scale of what they have built together. The private residence in Los Angeles sits in a luxury real estate market where the entry point for high-end properties starts well above what most American cities would consider premium.
Our mansion contains nearly 10,000 square feet of living space on
The home features high-end finishes, significant square footage, and the design profile of a property owned by people who understand that where you live communicates something about who you are. In Los Angeles, that communication is louder than in most places. The home presents the architectural profile of a premium Los Angeles residential property. It has a design-forward exterior with clean contemporary lines, a generous setback from the street behind mature landscaping that creates the kind of privacy that Los Angeles money specifically seeks out. The approach to the front door communicates the property's tier before you reach it. Inside, the principal living spaces are open and light-filled, with floor-to-ceiling glazing across the rear elevation framing views of the outdoor entertaining space and the hillside beyond.
For the mostly symmetrical Venetian villa.
The Los Angeles residence is the most visible output of that infrastructure. It is not a parsonage. It is not a modest pastor's home in a quiet neighborhood. It is a luxury property in one of the most expensive real estate markets on earth, owned by a couple whose combined brand has turned faith into a business that operates at a scale their congregation can admire, follow, and financially support, but not easily replicate.
And there's marble throughout.
Coming up at number 5 is the only entry on this list where the pastor was robbed on a live stream, and the $1.6 million private residence in New Jersey was part of the financial picture that federal prosecutors eventually assembled around his name. Number 5, Bishop Lamore Whitehead. Lamore Whitehead built a personal brand so thoroughly fused with visible luxury that his nickname preceded his theology. The Bling Bishop, and the private residence in Paramus, New Jersey, that sat behind all of it was a property whose valuation federal prosecutors would later find difficult to reconcile with the income of a small Brooklyn congregation. The $1.6 million Paramus residence is a premium New Jersey property in a market where that figure produces a home of genuine substance. The exterior presents a traditional luxury aesthetic. A well-proportioned facade set on a generous private lot with a landscaped approach, a 2-car garage, and the kind of architectural presence that communicates the price point before you reach the front door. A covered entry porch frames the entrance with the formality that properties at this valuation typically carry as a baseline expectation. Inside, the residence delivers the high-end finishes and design specifications that characterize everything else attached to Whitehead's public identity. The principal rooms are generously proportioned and connected across a floor plan designed for both private living and significant entertaining. A formal sitting room, a dining space sized for a large table, and a family room that opens directly onto the outdoor entertaining area through a set of French doors. The kitchen carries stone countertops, premium cabinetry, and a professional-grade appliance package. The primary suite occupies a private upper-level zone with a bathroom finished in marble, a soaking tub, and a walk-in wardrobe whose scale reflects the wardrobe demands of someone photographed in Gucci suits on a weekly basis. The outdoor space extends the property's footprint with a covered patio, manicured grounds, and the kind of perimeter planting that keeps the property private from the street in both directions. It is a home that belongs on a certain kind of street, and in Paramus, it found one. Federal prosecutors later alleged that the financial structure supporting this residence, along with the Rolls-Royce, the jewelry, and the wardrobe, was built partly on funds redirected from a parishioner's retirement savings. In March 2024, Whitehead was convicted on 5 counts and sentenced to 9 years in federal prison. The $1.6 million property remains one of the most precisely documented assets in that case. Let's head on to number 4, which sits on 182.9 acres in Fayetteville, Georgia, has a chandelier suspended directly above the swimming pool, and carries a name that its owner gave it himself. Number 4, Pastor Creflo Dollar. Creflo Dollar founded World Changers Church International in College Park, Georgia in 1986. A congregation that started with 8 people in a school cafeteria grew into 30,000 worshipers inside the World Dome, an 8,500-seat facility built for approximately $18 million, which Dollar claims was constructed without a single dollar of bank financing. The $4.5 million estate in Fayetteville is the asset that people stare at the most. The property spans 182.9 acres across 2 adjoining lots. On the exterior, there's a circular driveway framing a stone fountain at the entrance. Mature landscaping across the grounds, and a facade whose proportions communicate the square footage inside before you reach the door. The interior runs across multiple levels with principal rooms sized for a lifestyle that has moved well beyond conventional residential living. It has formal entertaining spaces, a commercial-grade kitchen installation, and bedroom and bathroom suites finished to the standard that a 19-bathroom property demands to justify the count. The outdoor amenity that draws the most attention is the swimming pool, above which a chandelier has been suspended. A design choice that sits at the intersection of luxury and spectacle in a way that is difficult to arrive at accidentally. The grounds across 182.9 acres extend far beyond what any maintenance team services casually, a private landscape whose upkeep alone represents a recurring cost that most Americans will not earn in a year. Dollar also holds a $2.5 million Manhattan apartment, a confirmed Rolls-Royce collection, and a Gulfstream G650 private jet reportedly valued at $65 million. The kingdom is simply the address where he sleeps. Coming up at number 3 is a compound which sits on 23 acres outside Dallas, and whose main residence alone covers more square footage than most apartment buildings. Number 3, Bishop T.D. Jakes. T.D. Jakes built the Potter's House in Dallas into one of the largest and most influential megachurches in the United States, drawing 30,000 weekly attendees at its peak. His ministry expanded into book publishing, film production through TDJ Enterprises, and a speaking circuit that placed him on stages far outside the church world. His estimated net worth sits at approximately $20 million, drawing from pastoral income, literary royalties, film production, and brand partnerships that most pastors never approach. The $4.6 million private estate sits on approximately 20 to 23 acres outside Dallas and Fort Worth. The main residence covers over 19,000 square feet, a footprint that places it in the category of small boutique hotels rather than private homes. The property includes a guest house, multiple pools, and luxury grounds that extend across the acreage in a layout that functions more like a private resort than a residential address. The principal living spaces are sized for a life lived at significant scale, with formal and informal entertaining areas, a kitchen installation that matches the overall standard of the property, and bedroom suites whose square footage rivals the total living space of most American family homes. The 19,000 square foot main residence sits on that acreage, regardless of which income stream paid for which square foot. The guest house accommodates visitors at a standard that most hotels do not reach. The multiple pools service a private property that the congregation helped build into an institution large enough to generate that kind of wealth, even if the specific dollars that purchased the land came from somewhere else. The estate is the most complete picture available of what 4 decades of building the Potter's house ultimately produced for the man who built it. Number 2 is a compound that does not belong to one home. It belongs to 6 of them, spread across 24 acres, with a helipad, a private lake, and a resort-style pool complex that would be the headline amenity at a 5-star property. Number 2, Bishop 4 Hilliard. 4 Hilliard of New Light Christian Center Church in Houston built a ministry that has operated in the Houston area for decades, drawing a congregation large enough to support an infrastructure that extends well beyond the Sunday service. The personal estate attached to his name represents the most architecturally extensive private compound on this list, and the details of it are specific enough to remove any ambiguity about what was built and what it cost. The compound sits on 24 gated acres and contains 6 separate luxury residences, totaling over 40,000 square feet of living space combined. The estate includes a resort-style pool complex with cabanas, a private lake, a helipad, and grounds maintained at a level that places the overall presentation firmly in the hospitality tier rather than the residential one. The property was previously listed at between $12 million and $15 million, making it one of the highest valued private pastoral estates documented in the United States. To place that figure in context, the median home value in Houston at the time of the listing was approximately $300,000. Hilliard's compound was listed at 40 to 50 times that figure, on land that could accommodate a significant fraction of his congregation's families if subdivided at standard residential density. 6 separate luxury residences on one private property raises a question that the listing price alone does not answer. Who uses the other 5? A compound of this scale does not exist to house one person or one family. It exists to house a lifestyle, and the staff, guests, security, and maintenance across 24 acres and 40,000 square feet represent an ongoing operational cost that compounds the acquisition price into something considerably larger over time. The median residential lot in Houston is measured in fractions of an acre. Impressively, Hilliard's compound is measured in dozens of them, on land that could accommodate a significant portion of his congregation's families if subdivided at standard residential density. The 6 houses, the lake, the helipad, and the cabana pool sit on top of what could have been a neighborhood. And now number 1, a private city inside a larger compound, a personal residence reported at 50 bedrooms, and a financial picture built on land so vast that the estate has its own name, its own infrastructure, and its own permanent population. Number 1, Bishop David Oyedepo. David Oyedepo is the wealthiest pastor on the African continent, with a net worth estimated at between $150 million and $200 million. He founded Living Faith Church worldwide in 1981 and built around it an infrastructure that no other entry on this list approaches in scale or ambition. The 530-acre Canaan land compound in Ota, Ogun State, is not a residential estate. It is a self-contained private city.
Of this place,
Within Canaan land sits Covenant University, hospitals, multiple secondary and primary schools, residential housing for over 15,000 permanent residents, a commercial bank, a petrol station, a bakery, a printing press, multiple hotels, and a private airstrip capable of receiving the 4 private jets Oya Depot owns. The main auditorium, Faith Tabernacle, is the largest church building in the world by seating capacity at 50,000. The compound has its own road network, its own security infrastructure, and its own utilities management that operates independently of the surrounding municipal systems. It is, by every functional definition, a city, one that happens to be owned by a single individual and governed by his personal authority. At the center of Canaan land sits what has been reported as the City of David, Oyedepo's personal residential complex within the larger compound. The private residence has been reported to span approximately 50 bedrooms alongside offices and private support facilities set behind its own security perimeter within the already secured outer boundary of Canaan land. The architectural scale of a 50-bedroom private residence places it beyond what any standard real estate vocabulary adequately describes. It is not a mansion. It is not an estate. The closest reference point is a private palace, a residential complex designed for one family, serviced by a dedicated staff and positioned at the geographic and administrative center of a compound, the size of a small town. For every member of Winners Chapel who has given a tithe, planted a seed, or responded to a call for a special offering, Canaan land is the most complete picture available of what that giving built at its most concentrated point. It is known, documented, and photographed. It is simply, for most of the people whose giving made it possible, so far beyond the scale of their own lives that the full picture requires a kind of imaginative effort that a Sunday service does not typically prepare you for. You just saw the compounds, the estates, the private cities, and the lifestyles that turned pastors into some of the most visibly wealthy religious figures on the planet. But here's the question that lingers after all the square footage, private jets, and gated acres. How did they get there? The real story is the money, the influence, the networks, and the financial systems that made this level of wealth possible in the first place. And when it comes to that conversation, nobody sparks more debate than Nigeria's biggest pastors. Click the next video right now. Nigeria's black pastors' billionaire mansions will shock you. Trust me, if you thought these compounds were impressive, you haven't seen anything yet.